Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Meera. I hope I live up to all the accolades you've given me so far. I had requested Ms. Meera to actually go ahead and suggest that they watch this one video of mine, which I had talked about women's equality and gender equality, and what would happen if women actually rule the world as opposed to men. And I wanted to set that as the base for today's talk. To be honest, when my friend Mr. Sai, who was one of your seniors at Rotary, invited me to come join you guys, I didn't really have much time to prepare, but I've just written down stuff, and I'm pretty sure that you will be happy with what I'm about to talk today. My hope today is to impart some of what I've learned in my journey through life, and these are topics that generally does not feature in people's conversations, and you might not find it on a regular basis at, say, a college. But these are topics which are spoken about in hush-hush among people, and not much of information is out there. Sometimes you have difference of opinion. So that is what I'd like to touch upon. And this is going to be in continuation to the patriarchy that's mentioned in the video. So you're all young adults here. I'm told that the major demographic who are today listening to us are between the ages of 18 and 35, with the majority of them being in college, many of you being ladies. So this is something which I'd like to share, because this is something which you as young adults will face when you go out there. And these are things that you would want to watch out for. So what I shared today is what I've collected over the years as my experience, and the points could be considered sensitive to some people because they wouldn't want to talk about it. So this is the question I want to put out there. Number one, divorce cases are on the rise. There are more people in India today getting divorced as opposed to any time before. Now, this is a factually correct statement. But the question I wish to ask is this a good thing or a bad thing? A lot of people out there will have a difference of opinion. You might see many people who come forward and say that this is an extremely bad thing. And why do they say that? We'll come to this topic in a bit. In my opinion, I honestly believe that this is a very good thing. For instance, let me explain. There is this talk about countries in which sexual assaults are reported high. And very often when cases come up, people talk about how the Western countries are very bad because there are lots of sexual assault which happens there. But countries like India, in comparison, we have very less sexual assault, or something like Saudi Arabia has almost zero sexual assault. So therefore, the implication they try to convey is that it's actually a good thing. Countries in the East are much better than the countries in the West. Now, here's a difference of opinion. Imagine that the countries of the West is a place where people are much more freer. Women are much more braver to come forward and report a case of sexual assault, because their societies have changed so much to the point that they will accept someone who comes forward and expresses that they've been sexually assaulted. Now, juxtapose this against India or any other place in the East, like Saudi Arabia. And what you would understand is that people, especially in countries like Saudi Arabia, the victim will be shamed for the fact that she was even out there to get sexually assaulted. So what we must understand from this scenario is that in a country where more sexual assaults are reported, it's a much more freer society. It's not that cases of rape or sexual assault does not happen in places like Saudi Arabia or in India. It happens, but very few people come forward to report it because society will give them a much more tougher time. So they would choose rather to stay quiet instead of coming and exposing that they have been sexually assaulted. So keeping this in mind, if you look at how divorce cases are going up in India, I would tell you it's a good thing. Why I would say it's a good thing is, unlike our elders in the past, and I would take this upon me personally. Let me say my mother would have left my father a long time ago had it been today's age. Because what in effect had happened was my mother had to put up with my father, despite the fact that he was not such a great person, because she had no choice. She would have had to endure a terrible life had she decided to leave my father. Because how would she earn? Because most of the women in the old days were not independent to earn for themselves and take care of themselves. And where would she go? How would she live in a society? Because single parents are not accepted, were not accepted back then. Things are changing slowly, but not completely. And we'll get to that. So there were situations and challenges with them. The whole family would have been extremely tough on them. The family itself would have said something to the effect of, how can you leave your husband and come? Go back to him, try to adjust. It's okay. It happens in every family. These are things we hear all the time. But the reason divorce cases are high now is finally women are able to actually stand up for themselves and be able to say, listen, I'm not going to put up with this. Let me live a life. It's important. Okay. I live only once. So let me have a proper life and then I'll pass on. Right. So this is one aspect which I want to highlight as to being a good thing as far as divorce cases are going up. And that's an indicator. So what is it that we face? We'll see that patriarchal mindsets in India will tell you the exact opposite. So some of the topics or some of the counter opposition points which you would hear is they'll say our society has changed, it's deteriorated, it's not like before. You know, in the old days it was so nice because everybody stayed together, we were one family, nothing happened, but the women were unhappy in most cases. A lot of women in those old times were just putting up with their husbands or their families because they had no choice. But now it's changed. So this is a good thing, is what I'd like to put across. All right. Moving forward, I would like to look at one very important feature or a, a role, a factor which is part of this entire divorce process which is coming up. Why are the divorces increasing? And you would see one of the key players, obviously, for a marriage to happen, there's a man and a woman, right? Or we can talk about other combinations of man-man marriage, woman-woman marriage. That's a different topic altogether. But I'm talking about conventional marriage where you have a man and a woman coming together. And you see that these divorces are going up. So the two people involved in this is the husband and the wife. So where is this going wrong? And this is my opinion as to how I have viewed this and what I've experienced and understood about people out there. This is something which I think every woman should be aware of. And I'm telling this to you as a man. And I think this is something every man should actually reflect upon and think carefully when he decides to go down that track. So here's what I see. Today's generation, or in effect, I mean, you know, the Indian society itself is in a form of metamorphosis. So in the 70s, you would have seen a very small percentage of people who had actually come out of the conventional ideologies and started moving forward. As time went by in the 80s and 90s, the number of people who were becoming more away from the old conventions of old societal ideas were increasing. In the 2000s, it increased more. And today we are standing at probably the highest amount. Once again, there is an important distinction to be made, which is that urban societies are very different from rural societies. So let's consider just urban societies for now. So here's a male who joins the workforce, a man, and he is yet unmarried. He will at some point start looking for a spouse or a partner. But in the beginning days, when he starts interacting with society, say he joins something like an IT company. And let me tell you, even before I go further with that, that this applies to any section of society. It doesn't have to be that somebody is rich or poor or from a more educated background or a less educated background. I'm talking about influences that people have when they actually start going out into the workforce. So this could be somebody working in, say, a cell phone shop, selling cell phones, or it could be somebody working in an IT company. It could be somebody working in a fast food joint. It doesn't matter the background of what it is, but basically the interactions these people will have. You will notice that the man now starts getting into the workforce. He's introduced to a whole different world, not the one that he is used to at home. He's seen his father and mother while he was growing up, but now this is a completely different world. A lot of people are much more forward thinking. There are get-togethers where all colleagues come together, because there are group activities which the HR department will put together, because they want people to interact. In such situations, you will see that this man, when he is at, say, one of these parties, he's seeing that his boss is such a cool guy. He knows what to speak and how to interact with people. He brings his wife to the parties. She's such a wonderful lady. She knows how to talk. She's so smart. She knows how to hold a drink. Everyone's having a drink. Oh, drinking is not such a bad thing. In the past, it used to look like a very bad thing, but now it's socializing. Everyone's having a drink. It doesn't look too bad. There are women in the company who are also having a conversation, and they're able to actually hold a conversation. They're having a drink. Everything seems so different. This is a new world. Now, this man starts aspiring for this. He also wants to leave behind the conventional life that he had had so far, and he wants to progress and move forward into a different life. In this process, what happens is he starts looking out for a lady who is someone who can hold a drink, who is educated, who's traveled, who knows how to speak to people. So he finally manages to find such a woman. And let us suppose he gets married to this lady. Now, things are great in the beginning. He takes her to the parties, he shows her off, he's very happy. The boss comes and says, hey, you have a very intelligent wife. He's happy about it. But as time goes by, we should not forget that he's also interacting and bonding with people socially who are part of his life from before. Now, when he's sitting in such a scenario, imagine this scenario. He's sitting and he's having a drink with the boys. One of the boys says, so what are you going to do for dinner? And he says, I don't know. I have to pick up, it's very late, so I need to eat something and go. And that guy responds saying, oh, well, for me, it's different because my wife will be waiting for me at home with food on the table. She wouldn't sleep till I finish eating. Now, this man is influenced by this kind of a conversation. And he aspires, though he aspires to be someone different and unconventional, he is now influenced by these thought processes. He comes home and he sees his wife is sleeping in bed already. It's late. She's had a hard day at work, but that doesn't register to him. What registers to him is that he has a friend whose wife is waiting for him at the table with the food, and he doesn't have somebody who's doing the same. If he doesn't have someone who's doing the same for him, and he tries to impose these ideas on his wife. This is usually the place where things start going wrong because there is a clash of different ideologies which happen almost instantaneously. I have noticed that many of the times that you see these issues are issues which crop up from this, because once again, this comes back to the whole concept of patriarchy, where the man is supposed to be superior, and he tries to impose that, and that is when all the problems break loose. Overall, these are the 2 points I wanted to get across to the audience today. And those of you who have already watched the video will know what I had tried to communicate in that. And I would like to open the floor for any questions that you might have. The idea is that I wanted this to be an interactive session. So these are the 2 thoughts I put into you. Please go ahead and ask whatever you wish, and then we'll take it forward.
So the first question that I've received is, how did this idea, first of all, of breaking this concept of misinformation come to you, or what made you think that, I should do this?
Okay, so our Indian constitution is extremely unique. We are the only constitution in the world which actually has an entire section dedicated to developing scientific temper. There's no other constitution in the world which says this. Our constitution actually says that we must aspire to develop scientific temper. Sadly, over the years, and I believe this is true because this is a worldwide phenomenon. It is not just related to India, but we are also suffering. And I would like to take the help of our Indian constitution to try and break that. Okay, so what is happening is off late, people have started relying more on cures, for instance. If they're ill, they would rather look at herbal cures as opposed to things which have been tested and tried, because they believe there is some kind of miracle behind it. And it's just that, the big farmers are trying to stop it. For instance, I'm just giving you an example as to where all this gets affected. If you look at our elders in the 70s or in the 60s, they had suffered from a series of deadly diseases like smallpox and polio and a whole lot of things. And they went through a whole drive or a whole era of medication, of vaccination, and they benefited from that. But through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, we kind of went down because these things were not very important to us anymore. So slowly over a period of time, it started creeping into society that, there is some miracle cure. All you have to do is eat one lemon, or all you have to do is sniff a little bit of neem leaves crushed in your finger, and it should cure everything. And this could work to a large extent because deadly diseases were not there. This whole idea of wanting to promote rationality came from the fact that many of the things that is being done today is actually hampering the progress of society, especially Indian society. In the last many years, we are regressing. We were a country which were leaders in terms of pharmaceuticals, at least the production of it, even though we might not have manufactured many of this. But now we are suddenly seeing that there is a growth of, say, alternative healthcare, which is hampering the overall population. So that's the main idea behind it. So it actually transcends over a whole big area. It's not just medicine, but even when it comes to belief systems or scientific systems everywhere.
We have one more interesting question from the audience. Do you think that the workplace gender discrimination still exists in different workplaces?
absolutely exists. It exists in every place. A lot of it also has to do with the fact that biologically we have a huge difference, so people are going to think differently. The patriarchal mindset itself is also very strong. So there are different degrees of discrimination which happens. You are now specifying sexual discrimination, as in gender-based discrimination. Okay, so that is one area. But you might also in between have a combination, which is gender plus caste, or gender plus race. So there can be a whole combination of various kinds of discrimination which happens at your workplace. But yes, discrimination is very, very apparent and very, very valid. It is there in every workplace to some degree.
We'll move on to the next question then. The interest of people in conserving the environment these days is very, very rare, but you've chosen a business line which is linked to these things. You're doing a business which is for conserving water and irrigation. So how or why did you choose this particular line of business, and did you have any specific motivation to do this?
Motivation, okay, I'll quickly run through that. 2-3 points. Number one, there are two questions merged into that. Number one, motivation comes from the fact that I went to engineering college. So I have a scientific bent of mind. I would like to look at things with, science in it. And I use this as an opportunity to kind of like translate that thought process into it. So that was my main motivation. I grew up in Dubai during my younger days. My father, who was a civil engineer, I have seen him face various challenges in terms of construction and as far as water was concerned, because the Middle East is one place which is trying very hard to change the way they are and live a life which is normal. And by that, I mean have greenery around them. It's a desert, so you have to be very conscious about this. Just quickly to tell you, 80% of all the fresh water available on Earth is used for irrigation. That is number one. We use very little for consumption, as human consumption to drink water as such. A lot of it also goes to industry. So irrigation takes up a lot of this water. And a place like the Middle East is trying hard to grow plants and grow things. So they create this water through desalination. So there are the water shortage in the Middle East also therefore translates into huge carbon footprint. The way they do desalination is through a process called flash distillation, in which they use huge amounts of fossil fuel to kind of evaporate water and then distill it back into fresh water. So that's a huge amount of taxation on the environment. That's a lot of carbon that's released. It's not like the water we get in India, because for us the water comes from rain. It just falls down. We use it. We put it in dams. Our problems of water shortage comes from mismanagement of existing water. But there are countries out there where the non-availability of water means that they have to actually burn fossil fuels. So I use that as an opportunity to try and come in and make a difference.
And you talk a lot about gender equality. So what's your first reaction when people don't actually understand the concept of gender equality?
It is changing a lot, is what I know. So I have a daughter who is she's only 11 years old, but she's quite well aware of her surroundings and she understands how genders operate and how this. So I see a lot of challenges which she faces as well. Even though she's not out there interacting with society yet at large, thought processes itself are very important. So it's very common, for instance, if you have a family in which, say, there is a boy and a girl, and the parents would make these comments, which they've just heard from their elders and they're parroting it. Like they would look at a boy who's crying and say, don't cry like a girl. That is a very sad thing to actually put into their head, because you're actually making it look like girls cry, so it's fine, and you shouldn't be a girl, and being a girl is a bad thing. And, it goes from one into another. So it is slowly transcending. People are slowly beginning to understand the differences. And I think it's important that every one of us actually talk about this. The more we talk about it, the more it'll get normalized. I think I was lucky because I grew up with in a household where my mom was very different. She was able to talk about these things. And I somehow luckily just met people who were different in their thought processes. So I have been able to come out of that. But I wouldn't know how much I've come out. I think I've come out. Maybe there are still vestiges in me. I will work upon it. If there is a mistake, I don't think I'm perfect. But yes, gender equality, when people don't understand, I spend time trying to talk to them.
Okay. And since you said you have a daughter, this is a personal question from me. Do you think parenting also plays a major role when it comes to, making your kids understand gender equality, or, having that inclusiveness within our homes?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's very important because, again, going back to what I just told you a little while earlier, it's very common to say, to see parents make statements like, "You're a girl, don't do this. It's not correct. A girl shouldn't do this." Or, we even have, customs which are traditional in our own system where we make girls feel a step inferior, like, cover your head when you're going out, those kind of things. This parenting has a huge role to play in making sure that your children don't feel unequal. Unless and until you can make your daughter feel that she's as good as anybody else out there, and unless you can tell the boys, that's more important. I think the girls will somehow try to live their life, but it's important those who have boys do their parenting properly, because they have to teach the boys that girls are not inferior to you. They're as good as you are. Unless and until you can tell your sons that, or your nephews that, there is no success. So yes, parenting is very, very important.
And what should you think should be the mindset of people in coming decades, given that we have a younger crowd? So what ground should be younger generation follow to make sure that there is gender equality, at least in the coming future?
See, a lot of things have changed. I'm looking at, being an actor, I keep interacting with people to see how people think. This is one of the roles I do. It's my homework. And what I've realized is those who were born in the 70s versus those born in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, now the 2010s, they all have a different mindset and they all think differently. My daughter was born in 2009, so she's already like, more than 10 years before. That's one generation already for that. And the way they think is so different. Between the interaction between boys and girls at the moment, I'm seeing it, I'm observing that it's very different as compared to before. Change is happening. It is very much within the urban settings that you see the maximum difference, which is there, where the boys are unable to try and say dominate a woman, which is a good thing. I see that as a positive. And I see that girls are also putting their foot down and saying they're going to do what they want. It's their life and they're going to lead it, which is great as well. The problem happens when you go into a little bit more into adulthood. That is where you start looking at how did your father behave when there was a certain situation, and you want to do what your father did. That's going to backfire big time.
So, what do you think is the barrier? What is the exact barrier which is not letting the gender equality thing entirely happen? I know it's progressing, but what do you think is the major barrier?
Yeah, so it is okay. Now I'm going to personally look at my own industry, for instance. Not very long ago, in the 80s and early 90s, you would see, and I'm sorry to say this, I'll stand by my statement. If you see a Visu movie in Tamil, you will see how every character in that, the woman is a bad girl, or she is the one who's sacrificing. The men are always so nice, they never did anything wrong. It's always the woman who was messing up, So that has changed now. You don't see that in movies also. It's not becoming like that. There's been a change. Constantly a change is coming in. Now the newer generation movies which are coming out shows women in a different light. They are progressive. They know what to do. They can take care of their lives. They don't need a man to survive, which is a great thing. And my father's generation, I still remember there were dialogues like Pullanalum, Purushan, Kallanalum, Kanavan, and all that. So that nonsense doesn't happen anymore, which is a good thing. So the barrier has a lot to do with how society itself gives space. And to change society, everybody should just rebel. That's the only way. So my advice to everyone out there who's young is, listen, you don't have to put up with nonsense just because, people were doing it in the past.
Yes, I think the younger generation really needed to hear that, sir, because what has happened in the past is what people try to follow for the future, and they don't really understand that, you have to stop and you have to start to think on your own that new things are coming up and you have to change your mindsets accordingly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's also the reason I mentioned that you will hear people trying to tell you that in the old days, everything was good. Our culture is gone, and don't listen to all that. That's not really true. As long as you're not murdering someone, you're not, harming someone physically, or, abusing someone, you're fine. You can live your life the way you're living. There's nothing wrong.
On the same note, sir, do you think unlearning and relearning can be an effective way to better the society?
Yeah, unlearning is very important, because if you are with a mindset which says that, women are only supposed to do this is all they're due for, to unlearn that is a good thing, and relearn something which is new. Absolutely, yes.
And how do you look at the aspect of women empowerment? So do you think it is also included in when it comes to gender equality? Do you think it is also a part of gender equality?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? I don't think it.
Yeah. So do you think the aspect of women empowerment, do you think this is also a part of gender equality?
Yes. If you are equal only if you have as much power as the man does, right? Otherwise, you're not equal. If someone's going to tell you cannot do this because you're a woman, that is not equality. So yes, you have to. That empowerment is required.
Okay. We have one more interesting question from the audience. What do you think is a required thing for the younger generation in terms of skills and ideology?
Skills and ideology, I will always stick to being rational because unless and until you can question, and this is something which I tell everybody, just because some older person comes and tells you something, like a Swamiji or a Guruji or even me, don't take my word for it. Go do your own research, sit down and check it out, find out from different sources, and then come to an understanding. I think the biggest drawback that we have in our society, which I'm seeing now, is people suddenly believe that somehow some people have a little more intelligence over the others, and what they say is God's word. It's not. You should question them, especially the spiritual gurus. I have a huge problem with them because I think they're peddling a lot of nonsense, and that is making society really bad.
Okay, so we have two more questions and we'll close with that, sir. So do you think that the masculinity that is going on in India roots from female discrimination, and the fact that giving females equal responsibility will reduce the male superiority? What the mindsets of male also?
Yeah, so unless and until women are given opportunities to show that they can do it, and I don't like the word given opportunity. I'm like, you women should fight and get your opportunity. You shouldn't have to be given anything. If you see societies like, and I'll take the example of Kerala, you had a health minister who was so good. She went there and did so much. So it's proved. You don't have to be a guide to do it, right? So it's very important. And even in my own video, which I made on gender equality, I mentioned the names of people like Jacinda Ardern, who is the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and she is doing a far better job than any other guy has done. So, you have to be out there doing it to show it, and that is how people will know that, yes, oh, she can also do it. And this is happening at micro levels in various companies and organizations, because you can see many of these guys, many of the men who are now, say, joining the workforce for the first time, have never had to take orders from a woman. And now when they're taking an order from a woman, it's very difficult for them because, that's just not done. So they try to rationalize in their head. They're like, well, she's older than me, so she's like a mom, I can listen to her, or things like that. And suddenly you have somebody like, say, Geeta Gopinath, who is the head of IMF, and she is a young lady, and she is like, controlling such huge responsibility. It becomes very difficult for a lot of guys to live with it. But I think, guys better just swallow it and somehow accept it.
So this would be the last question for the session. Given the whole bunch of audience here are young leaders or who are already leaders or are going to be an upcoming leader in this movement and also outside of the movement, what is that one thing or one message that you would like to give them on leadership, using which they can, try to make the society a better place to live for others?
Okay, a lot of this has to do with your political view of life. I am somebody who is a libertarian. So which basically means you do not control society with rules, which is applicable to you. You don't like something, that's your problem. You don't like it. You don't have to do it. But you don't have to force somebody else to behave exactly like how you're saying. So it could be about dressing, it could be about eating, it could be about how they're living. You don't like it, you step away and let people continue. So one very important aspect of leadership itself is to be able to get people to be together with their differences. That is lacking a lot nowadays. So my advice would be to polish and hone yourself in getting as much information as you can, and treating everybody equally. That will take you a long place. Actually, most of the world leaders that you see, those who have been successful and who are talked about for many generations afterwards, except the notorious ones, are people who have always been promoting equality.
I think with that, we have come to the end of our keynote session. Thank you so much, sir, for answering each and every question of ours. And thank you so much, sir. It was all your answers, the way you've communicated all these things about gender equality and racialism. It is very thought thought-provoking and inspiring, because I think a lot of us have definitely gained a lot of insight on these topics, which otherwise we might have not paid much attention to. So thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Meera, if you're okay, can I ask him a question?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hey, Aditya, thank you so much, brother. That was awesome
Sai.
as usual. Hi. I have one question. There are about 2,200 youngsters here, and in probably another 6 or 7 years, they'll all get married. What is your opinion on the living in kind of a concept?
Oh, this is a wonderful thing. In fact, I actually wrote down a little bit. I wondered if somebody would ask me that. And I'm going to say something which is going to be quite shocking to some people, but I personally don't think the concept of marriage itself is valid in that sense. The reason I say this is because every religion has a different reason for why they get married, right? So the Hindu marriage is not the same as the Muslim marriage, is not the same as the Christian marriage. It's all different. But we have kind of made a khichdi out of all this, and we think we all understand what marriage is supposed to be. It really isn't that way. The reason why our higher courts and the law of the land today recognizes two people living in is because that's all it is. At the end of the day, it is two people deciding to stay together. It doesn't need a institution of anything at all. It doesn't make any sense, because even if you are like married under some kind of an act, say the Hindu Act or whichever religious act, you're still required, if you're going to go through a bad time, you are going to get divorced. So it kind of brings us back to the topic that I started with. So if you are going to get divorced and you have to go through this entire process of annulling that, why should you do that? You're grown-up adults. You're deciding that, you want to be together. So it's fine. I don't see anything wrong in it, and I would promote it big time.
Thank you for that. I think a lot of people have got your message. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
I'd like to request our DRR, Rotract Club past President Kamble, to come forward and felicitate our keynote speaker for the day, Mr. Aditya Menon. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meera. Thank you so much, sir, Aditya Menon, sir, for your wonderful speech. And நிறைய ரோட்ராக்டர்ஸ்க்கும் இந்த மாதிரியான ரெஸ்பான்சிபிலிட்டிஸ் கண்டிப்பா இருக்கணும் அப்படின்றதா டிஸ்ட்ரிக்ட் கவுன்சிலோட மோட்டோமே. ஸோ அது சம்பந்தப்பட்ட நிறைய விஷயங்கள் நீங்க உங்களோட ஸ்பீச்ல கொடுத்ததுக்காக ரொம்ப ரொம்ப தேங்க்ஸ் சார். ஸோ சோஷியல் ரெஸ்பான்சிபிலிட்டி இந்த டாபிக்கும் கண்டிப்பா இருக்கணும் அப்படின்றதுக்காக நீங்க கொடுத்த ஸ்பீச் ஒண்டர்ஃபுல்லா இருந்தது சார். அண்ட் உங்களுக்கு பண்றதுக்கு முன்னாடி சேசா சாய் சாருக்கு ரொம்ப பெரிய தேங்க் பண்ணுவோம். ஏன்னா நீங்க இந்த மாதிரியான ஒரு ஒண்டர்ஃபுல்லான ஸ்பீக்கர் இங்க இருக்கிறதுக்கான முக்கியமான காரணம் சேசா சாய் சார் தான். ஸோ தேங்க்யூ ஸோ மச் சேசா சாய் சார். இன்கேஸ் உங்களை நாங்க அப்ரோச் பண்ணாம இருந்தா சார் இங்க இல்லாம இருந்திருப்பாங்க. ஸோ ஒண்டர்ஃபுல்லான ஒரு செஷனை நாங்க மிஸ் பண்ணி இருந்திருப்போம். Thank you so much, sir, and thank you so much, sir, Aditya Menon, sir, for your wonderful speech, sir.
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity.